Welcome, pool guys and gals, to the Let's Talk About Pools podcast, where your host, Lauren Broom, will take a splash into many topics in the pool industry to educate all aquatic professionals. Listen in, and you just might be surprised what you'll learn. So let's jump right in.
Welcome, everybody, today to the Let's Talk About Pools podcast. And on episode 47, I interviewed Alyssa Magrum with Colin's Hope. Very special episode on water safety, since May is Water Safety Month. I want to say thank you to our special sponsors, which are Skimmer and Blu-ray XL. And understanding the importance of talking about water safety. This is a very special episode this month. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and let's jump right into this episode.
Skimmer is an app that's built for pool service companies, and it really does everything they need to run their businesses. We have tens of thousands of techs using our app every day in the pools, in the field, and being able to just simply swipe left, swipe right, scroll up and down, take photos. Everything is so easy, it can be done with one hand. We know how hard our clients are working every day, and so we feel it's our responsibility to make sure we deliver a top-notch product and a support team that's capable of pleasing and satisfying our customers.
You can literally pick up the phone and someone will answer. And that sounds very obvious, but it's not when you talk to tech companies. And it makes you feel like you have a voice, and they listen and they actually respond to it.
When I first started, we were just pen and paper, putting door tags on. We actually tried a bunch of different apps. Seemed to always be something missing. We ran across Skimmer, and this one's by far been the most efficient, the cleanest, the easiest to work with.
I've looked into creating in-house ways of tracking and doing the same thing. It can be very costly. Skimmer allows you to have a customized experience because they listen to your feedback. It's like having a custom platform without the cost and labor involved in managing that.
So I was very impressed with the affordability of Skimmer, the benefits that we get in terms of maximizing route efficiency and being able to keep a record of all the chemicals used and pictures of all the pools all in one spot and information we can access immediately. It's just incredible.
The technician will do all these little clicks and say what they did and what chemicals they put in. They'll take a picture of the pool, and then Skimmer does this great report that gets emailed to the customer at the end, telling them what they did and how they did it, what chemicals they added, and customers absolutely love it.
For as long as I'm in business, I don't see myself ever doing business without using Skimmer. It's just the top of the line product to use within the market, and it just saves so much time while also being personalized to your company. Skimmer is a company that's going to keep your database and everything completely organized and in line for you.
One of our goals is to help our clients grow their companies, and we see every year, every day, we get feedback from our clients thanking us for allowing them to grow, allowing them to hire more folks, allowing them to make more money and put their kids through college, to have more time and more free time on the weekends. It's always a huge compliment when we hear our customers talk about how much they've been able to grow, how many folks they've been able to hire and employ thanks to the app.
Welcome, everybody, today to the Let's Talk About Pools podcast. And on my episode today, I have Alyssa Magrum, the Executive Director of Colin's Hope, located in Texas. Welcome today, Alyssa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm ready to talk about pools and all the things, water safety, drowning prevention, whatever you got, throw it at me.
Yeah. And really want to relate this to everybody that's listening to the podcast. So if you're a pool service tech or a pool service company or a pool builder, you're not left out on this, because we're going to relate this whole podcast episode to you guys as well. So everybody listening that has a pool on their property should be listening to this podcast episode, because we're going to be able to relate water safety for everybody here.
I feel like that's one of my superpowers in being in this space for so many years, is that I can pretty much relate water safety and drowning prevention to any human that has access to water in any way, shape, or form, whether it be in their professional life, their personal life. So I think we can make it applicable to anyone in your audience, for sure.
Even boaters.
Challenge. I'll take on that challenge. Oh, boater. Yep.
Going on the river. Just went tubing myself and at your local river on the Comal there in New Braunfels, Texas, while I was on vacation. And there was a drowning that happened there.
You were doing that here, and I was at a family wedding in Buffalo, New York, and I had an experience on the Niagara River boating where I was the only person in the boat that I was in wearing a U.S. Coast Guard approved life jacket. And then, of course, because this is what I do, I was looking at every boat that passed us. There was only one other adult in all of the boats that we passed that was wearing a life jacket, which is, we could talk about boating, like how many people drown after boating accidents or in open water because they're not wearing a U.S. Coast Guard approved life jacket. So yeah, this can be applicable at
everywhere. The beach. We had, while I was in Texas on vacation, I saw 2 people here on the Atlantic side where I live died in the rip currents off of the Atlantic coast right here of Florida. So we can relate it.
Some drown in beaches while you were here in our state. So for sure. Yeah.
Yep. And so many states have water somewhere. So we have to worry about it. It's not just swimming pools. So I wanted to put that out there to everybody. So we can relate this to everybody. So Alyssa, tell me why Colin's Hope was started and how you got involved.
Sure. So Colin's Hope is a water safety and drowning prevention organization. Colin was a 4-year-old here in the Austin area. And sadly, he lost his life to a drowning in a lifeguarded pool. And he was 4. And what happened in Colin's situation was he had swim lessons, but he wasn't a strong swimmer. And his family went to a busy pool, community pool, public pool, on a summer day, a Friday afternoon with a group of friends. And it was a lifeguarded pool. And this was in 2008. So family, friends, adults talking in conversation, kids playing in the pool, lifeguards in the lifeguard stand. And what they think happened was Colin, it was what's called a 0 depth entry pool. So it starts really shallow and then just gets deeper. And kids don't know how deep it's going to be. They don't know. When we were kids and we're about the same age, there was always a rope that designated that the water was deeper and you couldn't go past the rope or it was going to be over your head. And that's very rare now in pools. And I look at a lot of pools, but what they think happened was Colin walked into water over his head and he had some lessons, but wasn't a strong swimmer. So drowning is fast and silent, which is something that I want people to know. And they think that, Colin just went underwater really quickly, panicked silently. No one saw or heard him, including the adults that were there that were talking to each other. The lifeguard on the lifeguard stand didn't see him. And unfortunately, by the time he was found by a woman who was there with her kids at the pool that day, they got him out. Multiple attempts to resuscitate him were unsuccessful. And that day, June 13th, 2008, Jeff and Jana Holst, Colin's parents, lost their 4-year-old son to something that they learned immediately was the number 1 cause of unintentional injury-related death for children under 5. Colin was 4, and something that was preventable. And as parents, they vowed that day to do something, anything that they could so that no other family would have to go through what they did, lose their child to something that could have been prevented. So that was in June of 2008. By August of 2008, they had started Colin's Hope with just volunteers, a nonprofit organization with a singular mission to really raise awareness about water safety. They didn't know what they were going to do, how they were going to do it, or anything, but that they needed to do it. And my connection to Colin's Hope came in the day after Colin drowned. So my daughter, who's now 16, went to preschool with Colin. So they were in the same preschool. Wow. And I worked for another nonprofit organization. I did dropout prevention in schools. So I worked with a lot of counselors and social workers. And so the day that after Colin drowned, the owner of the preschool called me because I was a parent at that preschool. And he said, he knew where I worked. And he said, we had a student drown yesterday. Our teachers are a mess. They need counseling. Can you send some people over, the counselors or something, to talk to our teachers? And I did that, rallied a bunch of my social work and counselor friends, sent them over, and then had an immediate parental wake-up call. As a parent of, my daughter was 3 at the time, I'm a competitive triathlete. I'm a lifelong swimmer. I do open water swims. I race. She could swim across the pool and she was 3, but I never thought that drowning was something that I needed to think about as a parent. I think about bike safety and car seat safety and all those things, poison safety, lock up the poisons and hold a hand in a parking lot and don't touch the hot stove and all the things that as a parent, and you're a parent, that we have in our list of stuff we have to think about. Water safety and drowning prevention were not, and I live by the lake. It was just not in my consciousness. And when Colin drowned, and I didn't know him, but we were in this very small preschool. So when Colin drowned, it was a really huge wake up call as a parent. And so I started volunteering for the organization. And for the first 2.5 years, as soon as they started, I mean, we were tabling at events, just talking to people. We were playing water safety bingo, a game that one of our volunteers had developed for us. And about 2.5 years in, about 2 years in, I had hip surgery. And as a competitive triathlete, when you're told that you can't bike or run for 6 months, you choose your other sport, which is swimming, and you set a goal. I'm very goal driven. So I decided, okay, what can I do to help Colin's hope? It's swimming, water safety. So I decided I was going to swim 4 miles from in Austin, the 360 bridge. I don't know if you've seen it. It's an iconic, beautiful bridge. 4 miles to the Hula Hut, which is a restaurant that's on the lake. And I was going to raise $20,000 for Colin's hope. That was like, I'm a charity athlete. I can do that. And suddenly I called up Colin's dad and said, hey, I want to do this. And he's like, okay, I'll set you up a pledge page. And I started talking about it to my physical therapist and my athlete friends. And all of a sudden there were 19 of us that wanted to do this. And I was like, wow, I was just going to like swim with a kayaker to help me. Right. So we did this thing. And after that, when I was kind of handing over the checks and things to Colin's dad, he said, hey, we decided that we want to make an impact as an organization. We're going to hire an executive director. Would you like to be the executive director? I mean, my background's in nonprofit management, and I had just gotten a master's degree in organizational leadership and ethics. And I'd been at my place of employment that I loved for 10 years, but I kind of had reached the top of where there was really nowhere left for me to go. So my daughter was in kindergarten at this point, and I just decided that I would take a leap. And I thought, okay, she's in kindergarten. I can have a more flexible schedule in terms of being able to be at the school for all the things, that you have to be there all the time. And I'll help this little organization. I'll spend 5 years. I'll help them get a strategic plan and get on the path to doing things. And then I'll move on to something else. Well, this past December was my 10-year anniversary as the executive director of Colin's Hope. I came in not knowing really anything about water safety and learned very quickly. And now I feel like I know way more than I ever dreamed that I would know about water safety. And it's now become kind of at Colin's Hope, we've grown as an organization. We have a curriculum that's an evidence-based curriculum for young children. We have resources for parents and caregivers that are proven and effective. We work with anyone who will work with us in the realm of educating parents and caregivers and children about water safety, I will partner with. So that's why this conversation is so awesome to me. And I said, I think it is a superpower that I have, is that we can figure out, if you're willing to get in the pool with us around educating parents, caregivers, and children about how they can be safer around water, then I am your girl. Like, we will talk about it. We'll figure out how to do it. And I found that people in the pool industry, whether it's pool service techs or pool builders or apartment managers or HOA people, anyone, that there's such an influence there to educate all the people that are coming to the pools, whether it's a residential pool or a commercial pool or a public pool or apartment pool or whatever kind of pool, or open water even, to educate those people to learn things so they can be safer around water. And I think that's, where we're at. So I love this conversation. And like I said, when we were talking before, throw anything at me, because I can figure out how to relate it to someone who might be listening.
And education is great. And I know you're an organization that's kind of local to Texas, but you're representative of so many different organizations that you could have a local organization like Colin's Hope in your area. So it's to make you aware. Always look around and see where you can get information, because you guys provide information to anybody that wants it on water safety. So even if you don't want to reach out to Colin's Hope, there's going to be an organization that's going to be similar to you guys. If you're in Florida or California, there's a lot. I know we have a few down here in Florida that are very similar in their goals and messaging and mission as you guys.
So absolutely. And that's we're one of the roles that we play. So I'm a co-founder of a group. It's not an organization. It's a collective called Families United to Prevent Drowning. And it is now, sadly, there's close to 100 families that are involved with that group. And all of them have either lost a child or a loved one. Most of them are children. There's a few adults, but lost a child or a loved one to a fatal drowning, or had a child or a loved one survive a non-fatal drowning. And there are numerous family foundations. Some of them have started foundations and organizations. Some are just don't have organizations, but they're just family members who wanted to do something. So we share our resources. We try to have a louder voice, a more unified messaging. And there are a number of them in Florida. They're across the entire country. And Families United to Prevent Drowning.org is the website. And we have this book, which I have a physical book in my hand, but there's an electronic copy on Families United to Prevent Drowning.org. And you can, and we use this as a training tool because it shows the faces and shows that not every face looks the same, tells the story of what happened in the drowning. And there are backyard pools. A lot of them are backyard pools. There are open water. There are, public pools. There are rivers. There's all the kinds of water. So, Colin's face is just one story. He was 4 and he drowned in a lifeguarded pool. There's every, when I do training. So for example, if I train a pool service company, if I was training all their pool techs on the influence that they can have in educating homeowners whose backyards, they're trusted people going into a backyard. And I've done that job, so I know what that looks like. I can share stories of kids that have drowned in backyard pools. And one of the children for example, in this book is Cody Kerr. And Cody, I'll show you his picture, but Cody drowned in the backyard pool after the pool cover was not put back on the pool after the pool was cleaned. He got access to the pool. And so sadly, there's the stories are there, but the families that are doing this work are all over the country. And again, you're exactly right. Like if we work locally in Central Texas, statewide, but also nationally with some of our resources. And I'll challenge listeners to take our water safety quiz later, which is a global tool that we have. But there are local groups and I can help connect with those as well, because we work with all of those families, a lot of those families.
And some of the local groups struggle a little bit because they may not have some of the connections that you guys have already made. They may not have somebody like you involved in the organization that has such, great background with organizational management and that kind of thing. So they're just kind of like you said, a grassroots group of parents that were locally involved with childhood drowning, and they're just trying to get that awareness out there, but they're struggling to organize and get their message out, and that's part of my podcast for the summer is trying to get that out there more to all the different levels of people. And that includes our apartment managers, our community association managers. When they come into their job roles, they're thinking about managing a property, but they're not thinking about all the little details. When they have that public pool or community pool on that property, what could happen and what's involved. And they got to think beyond the basics that they have. They got to make sure that they communicate with their condo or homeowners boards and make them understand how important some of these things are.
And education is if I say, I don't know if you've read that book, Good to Great, but it's a great business book. And it talks about like what makes a business great versus just good. And they talk about this thing called the hedgehog principle in that book. And it's a book by Jim Collins, and it's a great book. But the hedgehog principle is basically hedgehogs are great at doing one thing. They protect themselves. And I used to have a hedgehog, so I totally get that. She used to get into a ball and protect herself. And what makes, a hedgehog principle is like, what do you do well as a company or as an organization? What do you have resources around, and what are you passionate about? And something, whatever that is, do that 85% of the time, and then 15% of the time you do other stuff. Well, we have found that it is our hedgehog at Colin's Hope to educate parents and caregivers and children about things they can do to be safer around water. And so we've developed resources around those things, parent and caregiver and child resources, and we share those. We get those to an apartment manager who can hand out water safety cards to every resident and hang these on their doors. We get this to, we have a new online parent and caregiver we call it our water safety course. And it's 4 videos that parents and caregivers can watch around talking about things like what are risky behaviors. People might not even know that leaving a child alone in a bathtub to go get a towel or to answer the phone is a risky behavior, or leaving a pool gate open, for example, just to prop it open while you're doing whatever is a risky behavior. So there are so many ways. And I will say, as an organization, that's something I'm super proud of, that we're very small. There are 2 of us that are on staff, but we can cover a lot of ground. And the beauty of being a small organization, there are pros and cons. You're scrapping for every resource, every penny, raising all the dollars to do the work, which is, it's an effort in itself, but we're also have the ability to be creative and innovative and turn on a dime to create something. So, how you and I connected was with one of our new partners, and I think you're new partners and a sponsor of this podcast, Skimmer, is, we were meeting to talk about how could we work with them to put some things in their pool software for pool service companies that would help educate pool service techs around.
That would be awesome.
So I'm giving away some of our ideas, but is it a checklist that a pool service tech could look at, like, what can I do to help educate a homeowner about water safety, or what are some things that we can do to reach that group? But I have the ability, because we're small, to say, yeah, I want to work with you. And I was telling you about our partnership with Swimply, the sort of, Airbnb for backyard pools, right? Yeah. And we're partnering with them to help reach their people with water safety education. But that's the beauty that I love about us as an organization, is if you come to me with an idea, I do have the creativity and the innovation and the autonomy to say, how can I help you put water safety into that thing, whatever that thing is, whether that's...
Well, you definitely have the energy too. I could tell. Yeah. You're very passionate. And when you have the passion for what you do, it really shows in the quality that comes out. And I really do agree that you stick to what you're good at and don't get sidetracked into too many things.
It's hard.
You get excited, but you got to do well what you're good at and stick to it. And that's what it sounds like you guys are doing. So, I mean, what is the mission and vision and hope of Colin's Hope?
So and we kind of touched a little on that in the mission and vision are really to provide resources and educational materials to parents and caregivers. And caregivers can be a grandparent, a nanny. I'm doing a webinar for Au Pair in America, the Au Pairs in America group, for their host families tomorrow night. So au pairs, nannies, babysitters, grandparents, camp counselors, anyone, daycare people that take children to water or whatever. But so we educate parents and caregivers and children about what they can do to be safer around water. And that may be teaching kids our curriculum, which goes through the whole hand rules. So kids know rules and they know, so we have these rules that are like, wait for a grown-up, and a grown-up should be watching you. It's important to learn how to swim, and teaching about life jackets and open water safety and drain safety. So we teach kids that, and we teach adults things like you need to appoint an adult water guardian to watch kids around water, and all the things, barriers and all the things that we need to teach parents and caregivers. So we provide resources, and that looks like water safety cards. We have an online water safety quiz that I'll challenge the listeners and viewers and whatever to go take it. It's at colinshope.org/quiz. Lauren, I'll challenge you to take it. It's 10 questions, everything from don't leave a child unattended in the bathtub and to how to get out of a rip current. And we both have witnessed rip current drownings in our states, and everything in between. There's pool safety stuff in there. And we've had close to 12,000 people in 47 plus countries, gazillions of zip codes, take the water safety quiz and then share it on their social media. You can print out I'm a water guardian certificate at the end. So some of our pool service partners here in Texas, I'll just name Patriot Pool and Spas. They're one of our partners here. They sent out the quiz on their invoices couple of years ago and said, homeowners, take this quiz, and if you take it, we'll give you $10 off your next cleaning. And I had hundreds of quizzes coming into my inbox, and they all said Patriot. There's a little comment box where you can put, if you take the quiz from being on this, why don't we say, put in the comment box, let's talk about pools, or whatever you want. Lauren, you can choose what you want them to say, that they heard it here. But it's a simple thing that people can do. So, back to our mission and vision, it's really to educate about water safety. And then our hope is really, you and I were talking in the pre-conversation around this about when we were both growing up in our teenage years, seatbelts were just kind of coming into play. You were talking about piling into the back of a truck. I remember getting into the back of the station wagon that we had, and we didn't wear seatbelts. And when I learned to drive, I had to learn how to put on a seatbelt. It's like the seatbelt laws were just sort of starting. So I had to learn that behavior. Well, my daughter, who is 16 and driving, when she first got into the driver's seat for her learner's permit, I didn't have to say one time, Ella, put on your seatbelt. She put it on because she grew up in that culture. So our hope at Colin's Hope is that we can create a safer culture around water by educating kids at the absolute, this is my silver lining of the pandemic. I wrote a book. It's called Colin and Friends Wait for a Grown-Up, and it's bilingual, and it teaches the first rule of our whole hand rules, which is wait for a grown-up. So this is like a board book. So it's like we've got parents and grandparents and babysitters reading this book to infants. So those kids are learning when they learn other things like don't touch a hot stove and buckling into your car seat and putting on a bike helmet. They're learning to wait for a grown-up before they go to water, or they're learning that grown-ups should watch them. So our hope is that we can raise kids from the ground up with safer behaviors. And I never say safe because water is inherently dangerous. So you'll never hear me say safe. I'll say safer. And then parents and caregivers, sometimes we have to change their behaviors, which is really a difficult thing. And but sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So that education piece. So I came up with this thing, we have this stop, drop, and roll for fire safety. And you have these.
I remember that when we were kids.
Right? Yeah. So we don't have anything like that for water safety. So what we've been saying at Colin's Hope is learn about water safety, talk about water safety, practice water safety, prevent drowning. So for us, we're putting out resources so people can learn, whether it's adults and kids, then encouraging people to talk about it. Like we're talking about it now. We tell parents and caregivers and grandparents to have a conversation with your kids. We encourage people to come up with their family. This is our bookmark. And on the back, it has a little thing where your family comes up with your own water safety rules, just like you have rules around everything else. Like we all have all these rules with our kids. Like let's come up with water safety rules. If you have a backyard pool, your rules are going to be different than if you're going to your neighborhood pool, or if you have a lake house, if you have a boat, if you're going to the beach. So the talking about the water safety starts that conversation. Exactly. And then we practice those behaviors. And the easiest one to say is like, we wear life jackets when we're near or in open water. That's an easy behavior. Or we appoint an adult water guardian who's watching, an undistracted adult who's watching kids, because then when we're learning, talking, practicing, we can prevent drowning. So that's our hope. Back to the question is like, our hope is that we can really shift the culture so that in 10 years, 15 years, we can say, oh my gosh, like kids are wearing life jackets and it's not a thing. We're not fighting with them about it because they grew up, that was just what they did. And I have my coworker has a 4-year-old, and he was raised literally in water safety because she's worked for Colin's Hope for more than his life. And so we're using him as like a little case study. Alexander knows all the rules, the whole hand rules. He is comfortable wearing a life jacket. When he's at the lake, he never complains. I have these great pictures of him flying a kite in his life jacket, eating a cupcake in his life jacket. Like he's learning that, just like we learned about the seatbelt. So our hope is that we can get this conversation into, I just worked with my OB-GYN about getting water safety cards into prenatal packets for like their patients, and they deliver 2,000 babies a year. It's like, they're going to get our water safety information. Pediatricians, when people have their backyard pool cleaned, they get educated. So for our hope is that we can just work with as many people that we can, both in aquatics and water safety and in the pool industry and outside also, so that we can just get this conversation and get people talking about it like they talk about so many other things.
I totally agree with you.
Longest answer ever, but like that really
But it was a needed answer that we needed to hear. So what are the things that most people do not know about drowning?
Okay, first of all, is that it can impact them. I have found in doing this work for over a decade now that so many people think that drowning is not going to happen to them. Like, my kids can swim, or I'm a good swimmer, or that's someone else's issue. And I will tell you that if I asked every family that's in this book, that's part of Families United to Prevent Drowning, if they thought drowning was going to impact their family, they would say no. And I will say that most people don't know that drowning is fast, drowning is silent, drowning is preventable. And I also think that most people don't know that drowning does not discriminate on the basis of race, gender, age, socioeconomic status, swimming ability. I'm a competitive triathlete. I race off-road triathlons, and I almost drowned in a race at the World Championships in Maui because the surf was so high. And I'm a really solid, strong swimmer. And, water is inherently dangerous, whether it's a pool or open water. And so I think those are probably would be my, people think that this is not something that's going to impact them, that it's someone else's issue. But if you ask, I have found in the decade plus of doing this, once I start talking to someone about this, most people have some story, whether it's I saw a kid go under in the pool when I was a child, or my brother pulled me out of the pool, or there are people have a story. It's just for whatever reason not in the front of their consciousness. And it's been buried. And I think I have a whole theory around why that is, because when you have something that's preventable, there's a lot of guilt and shame and blame and things that happen. But I really think that a lot of people just think that it's not going to happen to them until it does, or until it reaches and touches their world. And then suddenly it's like, oh, we have to think about it now. And it really is everyone's issue. I mean, there's some really great research that just came out from the CDC and from the Consumer Product Safety Commission that has some really great data. Finally, I love data, and I want our programming to mirror like what's actually happening. Where are people drowning? Are they drowning? In Texas, over each year, over 50% of our child fatal drownings happen in backyard pools and in pools. Right now, we're at of the children that we've lost in Texas to fatal child drownings. That's not even the non-fatal ones that happen. I believe it's over 75% are in pools. And so,
Wow.
You look at and I look at the data because I want our programming to be driven by what's actually happening, not by what I think is happening. So I think people need to realize that this is something that can touch your world, whether it's a family member or a loved one, or, I'll tell you two really quick stories that are kind of break my heart. Well, one that happened last year that was, it happened in the Houston, Texas area, but a pool service tech came to clean a pool and found a child in the backyard pool who had drowned, who had gotten access to that pool through a door or something. And the pool service tech showed up to clean the pool and discovered the child and had to be the one that made the phone call to 911. And, there are so many people that think that it's not going to enter their world, and then it does. And so I think that's something that I think is really, really important for people to know, is that it's preventable. And so that's why it's like, why wouldn't we wrap ourselves around what can we do? What can we do to help prevent them? Because it is preventable. There's a lot of things that we can't prevent, but this one we can. So
I totally agree. And people always think, oh, it's not going to happen to me, or it's not happening to me, so I don't have to worry about it. And then they change their mind as soon as it does happen to them. And so 100%. If we can get everybody to care about it, even though it hasn't happened to them, that's the goal, is to get everybody educated and aware on this topic, regardless if it ever does happen to you in your life or not. Because if you're a parent,
you don't want it to happen to you.
You don't want to lose a child or have a child that even if they do survive may not be in a condition that they're going to lead the life that they would have led before the almost drowning, fatal drowning.
And there's new data, which we used to, and this is so interesting to me, and so I'll geek out for a second on the data piece, but we used to, like, non-fatal drowning. So drowning, for your listeners, this is something that a lot of people don't know. Drowning is a process, and drowning is, so if you think of it like, if you have a heart attack, you don't like have a near heart attack. You either have a heart attack and then the outcome is, does the person live or does the person not live? And drowning is a process. So drowning is a process with multiple outcomes. There is a fatal outcome where the person dies, or a non-fatal outcome where the person survives, sometimes with a brain injury or a lifelong injury like you're talking about, Lauren, and sometimes they're miraculously okay. That doesn't mean that some trauma and emotional stuff or financial hardship and things are still there. But so you have the fatal and then the non-fatal. And so we've been using in drowning prevention this estimation of how many non-fatal drownings there are, because they're really hard to track. We've been using for the past couple of years, for every fatal drowning, there is an estimated 5 times as many non-fatal. Well, there's this new report that just came out from the CDC that the new number is, for every fatal drowning, it's estimated that 8 times as many non-fatal drownings. That's a huge shift. Like, we use the analogy of school buses when we try to communicate to people how many drownings. So for example, I'll use Texas. Last year in 2020, we lost 81 Texas children to fatal preventable drownings. So that's the equivalent of 2 school buses, let's say, 2 big yellow buses. And we've been saying that 5 times as many school buses of how many non-fatal drownings have occurred. Well, now that's 10 school buses. If I have to redo that calculation now I'm saying that's 16 school buses of non-fatal drownings. And it's crazy how that image, I don't know what that image does for you, but for me, it's like appalling that those are preventable.
Big image.
Yeah, it's huge. So,
well, and when you get into the statistics, the numbers might be actually a little bit less from me talking to other people. They've talked about how it may be classified as something different at the hospital and not classified as a drowning. Yes. And that happens in so many instances. I mean, even with somebody that might have had a heart attack and then they went in and they have COVID as well. And if they die, how are they going to classify? Did they die of the heart attack or they die because they have both at the same time? They pick one sometimes and not put both on there of what they died from. So that can skew our statistics a little bit if they say they didn't die right away and they died because an organ failure. Kidneys failed or something, but that was a result of drowning. Right. And I had this conversation with Richard Kaufman, who had a child that drowned, and he has his own podcast. And it was, sometimes they don't classify it as a drowning, so it doesn't get put into your statistics for your state, county, or city. Right. So do we really know what the numbers are, No. And that's the thing. Like, we go with the best data that we can. Like, we go with the best. Like, I work with the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services daily, sadly, on the fatal child drowning data, because we know when they get a report, we know what, we get those. And even that data is probably not 100%, I'm sure we've missed something, but it's data that I feel comfortable using. But that non-fatal drowning data is so difficult to track. But knowing that now we're saying one, for every fatal, it's estimated 8 times as many non-fatal is, that's a huge shift in our messaging. But so this is something that I think people don't know what they don't know. And I really do, when I talk to parents, when I talk to anyone about this, I like to look through that lens. It's not that people don't, I really think people just don't know. And so that education piece, it's that aha moment I had when Colin drowned. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know. And so I'm not going to blame anybody for me not knowing, but what can I do to be part of the solution of helping more people know? And that's why that whole learn, talk, practice, prevent
so what we're going on is kind of the basis of categorizing how we reach people.
Yeah, and keeping the message basic so that people will remember it too. And the more long and drawn out it is, they're not going to remember it, or they're not going to pay attention to it. Learned that when I was a regulator for pool inspector and pool rule signs. You make it wordy, they're not going to listen to it. They're going to ignore it. So you make it short, kind of quick and easy, and kind of has a ring to it. They kind of remember it a lot more.
Yeah.
So who's most at risk for drowning?
So if we look at the stats, I mean, children under the age of 5 are certainly at the highest risk. And what type of water, we see those children drowning more often in bathtubs and pools. And then as kids get older and into adulthood, that risk doesn't actually, it changes. But we lose more older kids in open water, more adults in open water. Something that's interesting in the data piece is now we're getting to look at some racial disparities, and we're looking at where we're losing people of different races and how that differs. It's such an interesting filter to look through. So typically that under 5 is the greatest risk, the highest risk. And as we get older, the risk and location of water changes and access to water changes. And so that's something that we're looking at in that space. And
just want to stop in the middle here and say thank you to our other podcast sponsor, which is Blu-ray Etzel, for helping to sponsor the podcast. I want you to listen in a little bit about Blu-ray and what they have to offer to the pool industry.
Blu-ray XL is the power of minerals working for you. Reduce your overall chemical costs and labor up to 50% guaranteed. Whether you have 20 accounts or 20,000, Blu-ray XL's direct pricing and free shipping to the pool trade have you covered. Improving pool professionals' profit and work-life balance is what they do. Blu-ray XL, the real mineral purifier. Visit them at BluRayXL.com.
Blu-ray all day.
So we were talking about, the children and different people that are most at risk of drowning. I know that even personally, I had heard of in the county I worked in for our local health department that there was an adult, like an older person, senior, that almost drowned in their public pool at their homeowners association. And it was because they had a heart attack. Yep. And then luckily they were teaching a child to learn how to swim. And the child was able to get them over to the edge of the pool, like drag them over. And the person didn't drown. It was an almost drowning. And they survived. And I had heard that in the paper locally. How common is that with seniors that could have an medical episode? I've always heard it's not safe to swim alone, no matter what age you are. Yes. And people think, even though they're old, they're experienced. I'm 65. But I'm healthy. I'm good. And then if you just have a random heart attack or something, and you're by yourself in your backyard pool, now you may not. You could survive the heart attack, but
you're definitely not going to survive. Yeah. So to answer that, I have a lot to say about that. And one of the things is that I train a lot of lifeguards around on this telling them Colin's story and talking about how they can use their role as a lifeguard in their personal life to be good ambassadors of water safety. But then all the things that they don't think about when they sign up for a summer job that might be fun, or all the things that sometimes people start lifeguarding because they love the water, one of the things I talk about in my session is any person that puts a toe in that pool or steps foot in the gate of your pool, whether they are a baby, a toddler, a child, and a master swimmer like myself, or a lap swimmer, or a swim team kid, or an adult, they require equal watching, because you never know. None of us are drown proof. And so I know we've had locally at two in the last 2 months, 61-year-old men who had heart attacks in a lifeguarded pool, and one survived and one was a non-fatal, one survived, was a non-fatal drowning, and one was a fatal drowning. And when you have I swim laps all the time at the pool that's the community pool that's 100 yards from my condo. And I swim in the mornings at 6 a.m. a lot. And it's me and a lot of older gentlemen in their 60s, 70s, even 80s that are swimming laps. And when I train those lifeguards, I'm like, you guys, those are high risk group for, like you're talking about, heart attacks or seizures.
Yep.
So anyone really, I use the example too of like, have you ever had a leg cramp? And most people have had a leg cramp or some type of muscle cramp. And I'm like, if you have that cramp on the land, it's going to be a pain in the neck and it's going to hurt, but you can work it out and you're safe. If you have that leg cramp when you're in a pool by yourself, or you're in the lake by yourself or whatever, that can become a drowning very quickly. And so the age group that you're talking about certainly is at higher risk of things like heart attacks or health related things that can then become a big problem when they're in water. So because water is obviously, when you have that type of situation, anything, when you're having it in water, whether it's a heart attack or a seizure or something like that, then that's at risk. And so certainly that age group, that older age group, is at higher risk for those things. I say never swim alone, regardless. Like, I'm a strong swimmer. I will not get into a pool and if there's no one around. You can hit your head, you can, like, stuff happens. And so I think that's something that's important for people to know, just because, that age group of the younger kids is certainly at higher risk because of lack of knowing how to swim and lack of understanding that if you jump into a pool, you may not float. If you can't swim, you may not be able to come back to the surface, those things. But any age group is really, the risk does not go away.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted everybody. It's not just children.
Yep.
Where do most drownings occur, Alyssa?
So again, that is a lot of dependent upon age. So as younger children, that under 5, we tend to see more drownings in tubs and pools and tubs. So we say bathtubs and hot tubs and pools for sure. And then as the age gets older, we tend to lose more of our older kids and adults in open water. So lakes, rivers, beaches, creeks even. But something that with the new data that we're looking at, there are some racial disparities where we tend to see more the age group of like 5 to 14 in for Black children, we tend to see more drownings in pools there, whereas for our counterparts at white children tend to drown more in, like, if we're looking at the older ages, in open water. It's access. What is the access to water, and what are the who knows how this learning to swim or knowing how to swim plays into where the drownings happen. And something that I am seeing more and more, certainly after COVID, when a lot of pools were closed, well, certainly backyard pool drownings, our backyard pool drownings numbers went up in the state of Texas last year because people were using their pools. They use them mostly year round here, probably for you in Florida too, because of our weather. But people were at home with trying to work from home, and kids were at home on school, and supervision things changes, and that access to that backyard pool became greater. But then we also saw more drownings happening in open water because the community pools were closed. So people were taking to the beach or the lake and thinking that, a lot of people think, oh, I learned how to swim in a pool, or I'm used to going to a pool, I'm going to go to the lake or the beach, and it's going to be the same thing. And it's very much not the same thing. You've got currents, you've got rocks, you've got debris, you've got all the different, swimming in a pool where you can see the bottom, you can use the steps to get out, or the ladder, or you have the depth marker on the side that if you actually look at it, you can see how deep it is, or maybe you'll have a rope that shows you. When you get into open water, I mean, I live by the lake. You're probably closer to the beaches than I am, but that water is very different. And so I think that's something that we're seeing, at least adults. Then you add alcohol into the mix, and alcohol and water do not play well together. And, so I think we see those open water drownings where people not wearing life jackets on boats and in open water. So it certainly changes. So it's pools and tubs, we have this thing, and I'll show you on our water safety card. It's called the X effect, and it's a diagram that Dana Gage from the LV project did, where basically it's a diagram that shows that we lose more of our kids, older kids and adults in open water, and younger kids in pools and hot tubs. And so that's it. Really, there's so many variables that play into it, but that's all kinds of water, all ages, all kinds of water.
Yep.
But certainly,
and there's more bodies of water being put in the ground, because if you ask any pool builder right now,
100%.
They're crazy busy. Every pool service contractor and pool service builder and company is busy. I'm hearing long waits to get a pool in the ground.
Oh, in Austin, I feel like in 2020, I think in the city of Austin alone, I'm probably going to screw this up. It was between 6,000 and 8,000 permits were put in to have pools built. And I know our partners, we work with builders, we work with pool maintenance companies, like everyone is bonkers busy, because
once the market goes up and people have equity in their house, they pull out a home equity loan and they want a pool. They want to be able to, especially with COVID, we can't go anywhere. Let's put a nice little oasis in our backyard. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay in this house. So they want to enjoy it. But now you add that risk of drowning once you do that. So what can we do to prevent drowning, Alyssa?
So that is a great question. And that's the thing. Drowning is fast, silent, and preventable. So there are things that we can do. So if we're talking about, I'll use our water safety card, which is, we have what we say layers of protection. It's not one thing that's going to prevent drowning. We have to layer things. So, the very first thing is to say, watch kids around water. We use the term water guardian. You might have heard the term water watcher, but that's where when you're near or around pools or bathtubs or even any kind of water, to have an undistracted adult who's watching the water. That's like we tell people, we have this on our water safety card, this badge breaks out the side, and we tell people to put, assign an undistracted adult to, here, I'll do it. Assign that undistracted adult who's the water guardian, and they are literally on duty watching the water. So I'm the water guardian. We tell people choose 20-minute shifts. And then then I say, okay, hey, Lauren, you're the water guardian now. And I physically transfer the badge to you so that you're wearing it and you're watching, because so many times we see drownings where people think they're going to hear something or see something and that they're going to be able to respond even, but if you're not watching, drowning is fast and silent. So if we have that undistracted adult, so they're not on their phone, they're not engaged in conversation, they're watching. That's a very simple thing. Another thing we talk about is enrolling in swim lessons. And right now that's really difficult because there are waiting lists. There are a shortage of swim instructors. Not every community has equal access to learning how to swim, but that's certainly a layer of protection. Life jackets, and we say wear U.S. Coast Guard approved life jackets, properly fitted. And we're not talking about water wings. There's some controversy around the puddle jumper thing, but those are U.S. Coast Guard approved. But it's important with life jackets that kids know how to learn how to swim and know how their body feels when they're not in a life jacket, because we've seen situations where a child has been bobbing around the pool all day in a life jacket and floating around, and then the life jacket comes off to get a snack or something like that, and they make their way back to the pool and they jump in thinking they're going to float because they've been in a life jacket all day or a puddle jumper all day, and then they don't float. And so we talk to people about talking to your kids about life jackets, showing them how to properly put them on, but then also making sure that they know that they don't float if they don't know how to float, and they don't know how to swim, that their body is not gonna do the same thing when it's not in the life jacket. And when you swim, when you're in a life jacket, you're in this position, a vertical position, and you might be bobbing around the pool. When you're swimming, you need to be able to be in the horizontal position and put your face in the water. So it's so important that when we're talking about life jackets, that we have a conversation around them. We don't just put people in them and then don't ever talk about it. That's an important part of the conversation, and that's a whole nother thing. We talk about barriers, ensuring multiple barriers to water to block access. So if we're talking about fences, we love four-sided Fences, isolation fences with self-closing, self-latching, locking gates, and we don't love when people use the house as the fourth side of the fence. One of those new reports that I mentioned by the CDC and the CPSC, I can't remember which one, but it said something, there's a stat in there that's, I believe it's close to 83%. Four-sided fences have an effectiveness of 83% more than three-sided, because a lot of times kids gain access to that pool area by a door that was accidentally left open or unlocked, or a doggy door or something like that. So blocking access, and I know I can have conversations all day long with people about who don't want a pool fence because they think it's ugly or aesthetically, but that is a lifesaver. And it can be something that can slow down a child's access.
Yeah. And that's somebody, I'll have that coming up on the podcast this summer too. I'll be interviewing Eric Lupton.
Oh, I know
the
Eric.
owner
of
Lifesaver Pool Fence. So we'll be talking about some of these layers of protection that you're talking about right now individually on the podcast. There's some great technology out there that I've already interviewed the owner of Camera Eye.
Oh, Camera Eye. I just
also interviewed the gentleman that owns it was two gentlemen that own Wave Detection.
Yep. We're working with Wave. I just heard about Camera Eye from our partners at Swimply, actually. And so there's great technology.
So they'll be on the podcast this summer after this episode, because this episode really brings in those individual topics. And of course, you can't rely on just the technology either. And they'll even attest to that. Well, even Eric Lupton with, Lifesaver Pool Fence. It's
a layer.
He puts great stuff out there beyond just his information. He's a really big proponent for childhood drowning prevention.
Yep, and I've been on his show or his podcast last year, I believe. And
he puts out some great stuff on social media that I share, and it's beyond his product that he sells, because he knows that it's beyond what he does that is going to prevent drowning. What you're talking about right now, that layers of protection, it takes a bunch of different things that we do in order to make it preventable.
We say you layer it like a cargo net or something like that, so that if one layer fails, so if the supervision piece fails, because things happen, life happens, or if the fence the gate gets accidentally left open, or the pool cover doesn't get put on, or the alarm isn't, whatever it is, you have these multiple layers in place. So something,
is going to catch
it. Something's going to catch it. Right. And here's one thing that I love about the pool industry, whether it's builders, tech, technology, or pool service techs, or fence, whatever. I love that everyone will get in the pool together to work on drowning prevention. And we have partnerships that cross all of those. All these people you're talking about, we're pretty much working with most of them, because they have lined up with us to say, we all believe we want people to, you'll see behind me everywhere on my coffee mug, the best day ever. And Colin used to say today was the best day ever. And that's our mantra. We love the water. I mean, I've got water related tattoos. I mean, this is something we want people to enjoy it, but we want them to do what they can to protect and put those layers in place. And this industry is amazing with saying, we believe in that. We want people to enjoy the water. We want them to be safer around the water. So let's all work together. And it's
just getting the word out, like if it's a podcast like this that somebody listens to, but it could be any pool technician or pool service company or aquatics, parks and rec in any city, state, town. It doesn't matter.
Get in the pool with us, because this is how we're going to move.
Let's all work together. Let's be aware. That's why I'm doing this summer series of podcast episodes. And then if they're not aware of some of the layers of protection that, specifically with some of the technology, that will be highlighted. Yeah. We're highlighting organizations like you. We've highlighted, I'll highlight a gentleman that talked about legislation at the political level. Trying to do something about childhood drowning. And I knew somebody here in Florida that was doing that, and he'll be on the podcast coming up soon. So this whole summer, we're going to have some good episodes on childhood drowning. And in this series could go all the way into September into October, because some of our states, they're, like you said, swimming year round. So
totally. Drowning is something that does happen year round. That's another thing that a lot of people think, oh, it's seasonal. But in states like Texas, Florida, California, Arizona, where we are, I swim in our lake 10 months out of the year in open water.
We have a lot of tourists that come down to Florida, and they're from up north, and we have no snow, and they will go swimming even if it's 40 degrees outside. They're from Canada. And there's no snow on the ground. 40 degrees is warm to them. They'll go swimming in a bikini and then go lay out, and you still get sun, even though it's not summer. We just don't think of it when you live in your state year round, that we think it's cold. So we're not going to go swimming that 1 or 2 months, you were saying you swim 10 months. So it can happen anytime, if people are out on the ice and ice break. Even though it's cold and frozen outside, they could drown in that water there because they can't swim.
We see that our partners at Abby's Hope, they're in Minnesota, and I share their cold water safety, because they put out stuff during the winter months around that, where, we had a winter storm this year in Texas that we had to put out some immediate messaging, because people were using their bathtubs to store water because we had no power and no water. And the bathtub we had a drowning in a bathtub because the people had filled up their bathtub for water, because the water was, pipes were freezing and things. And so suddenly I was on, multiple news media things saying, if you are filling your bathtub, you need to lock that door. You need to block that access. So it's, it's crazy how this message really can apply in so many.
Well, let you finish up your layers of protection.
Yeah. So one of the things we talk about is just home safety, and that includes bathtubs and toilets and buckets, dumping out buckets if you're, because you can drown in this much water. And we've had toddlers who drop a toy in a bucket that there was water left in her that filled up with the rain, and then they reach in to get the toy, and toddlers are top heavy. We talk to people about dumping out kiddie pools, like the little tiny pools that, I know when my daughter was little, I didn't know all the things that I know right now. And I'd be like, oh, she's going to get in the pool in the afternoon. I'm just going to leave the water in there on the deck or whatever. And that is a hazard, right? So we talk to people about dumping out the kiddie pools. If you have a child go missing, check the water first. We also say check your car first here in Texas. But if you have water anywhere, a neighbor's pool, a pond, if you have a child go missing, go first to the water, because you have less time to respond. Drain safety, we talk about. For kids, we say stay away from the drains, don't play near the drains. For adults, we talk about knowing how to turn off the pool pump. We talk about making sure that your drains are VGB compliant and they're not broken or cracked and screws are not missing. Talk about tying your hair back. I have this crazy hair right now, and bathing suit strings can get stuck in a drain. So we talk about drain safety as a layer of protection. Open water safety, we've done a lot of talking about, learning how to behave around open water versus we call closed water pools, learning how to get out of a rip current. That's a layer of protection. And then we talk about learning CPR as a layer of protection. We don't want to get to the CPR part, but I feel like it's something that should be in everyone's toolbox to know CPR, whether you have to respond in a drowning, which then you do need the rescue breaths, not just compressions, or it's just a tool in your toolbox if you need to respond to someone who's had a heart attack. So all the layers of protection are on our website. We have a resource page, colinshope.org, for every layer of protection. So if you want to learn the basics or you want to dive deeper, you can learn it all. We have our water safety quiz that hits a lot of those layers of protection, but it really is about the learning piece and knowing there are resources out there. And get educated, because then you can talk about it. We can change those behaviors, and then the drowning numbers will go down.
I totally agree. Education's a biggie. Mm-hmm. So while we're in here, I know some of the new things we're seeing right now, not the only industry, but we have lifeguard shortages right now.
Yep.
We have swim instructor shortages. So how is that going to relate to drowning?
Well, we're very nervous. We were nervous when COVID started about all the things that were going to happen with greater access to backyard pools and things I was talking about. And then also with the swim lessons stopping last year, mostly there were some places that were able to pull off swim lessons a little bit during COVID. And now that we're kind of coming out of it, I know we work with a ton of swim schools and swim lesson instructors we have a shortage of instructors. We have long waiting lists at swim schools. So we need more people to get trained as water safety instructors, swim lesson instructors. We have people that are still worried about that piece of going back to that. So even if there are swim lessons, we've got some fear going on with, coming back from COVID, and is it safe? And it is safe. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there. We've got kids that will not have had swim lessons now for 2 years. You were talking about your 4-year-old, I think.
Not having swim lessons for 3 years, but it was a combination of a local pool not being able to, a city pool not being able to afford repairs.
And that's a whole other thing. Aquatic deserts, communities that don't have pools available. And there are some communities that have one place to get swim lessons. There are others that have 50 places. And so the lack of access to swimming lessons is huge. And now we've got this lack of swimming instructors, and we're trying to figure out, is it a work ethic thing? Is it people don't want to do that job? Is it a pay situation that swim lesson instructors and lifeguards are not being paid enough? I think it's a combination of all of those things, but we've got to solve it. I was sharing with you, a friend of mine out in San Diego has an incredible DIY teach your kid to swim program on her website. Her name is Swim Kim, and she's amazing. And her website is Face in Water. And she has this great thing where she encourages parents and caregivers to learn how they can help teach their kids to swim. And you can either use it as a bridge between some swim lessons. So say your child has one swim lesson a week, what can you do as a parent in between those lessons to help them practice the skills? Because there's a lot that parents and caregivers can do just by getting in the water with their kids to help. If you're not a trained swim instructor, obviously things like helping them learn how to put their face in the water and acclimating to water and things like that. But it's going to be a big problem. You think about your 4-year-old, in their bodies, first of all, how their bodies change in 1 year, just from how the body behaves in the water, and then you multiple years on top of that of not having had swim lessons. I mean, I think we're going to see this is going to be a while for us to recover from that.
It's physically, but also a mental thing in their head if they're not used to being in the water for that period of time and being, they always say the kids learn the most and are a sponge at that age. You have the most chance to affect them on water safety and learning how to swim for one of those layers of protection, which is very important. My first 2 kids, they're older, they're 17 and almost 14, and they had swim lessons from the time they were babies, 18 months, and they went through the American Red Cross program, and they went all the way through and graduated, where then they were done. And they're very good swimmers. I mean, they go underwater, they do the whole thing, and I don't have to worry about them as much. Yeah. But this little guy had my little boy, he had a much different experience with lack of swim lessons compared to them.
Yeah. So I think
I see a big difference in how he looks at water, how he's approaching the water. He doesn't want to go underwater. He acts like there's a lack of self-control when he goes underwater, and it has to do with not really having that instruction for that 3 years. And we've taken to a pool, but he will only go in the water if he has like a flotation device.
Yeah. And so,
which is not swimming.
Right. And that's the thing. I think some of it too is we are pairing that in the water instruction or even in the water acclimation with that you can do even in the non-structured swim lessons, but that getting him some comfortable with putting his face in and those pieces, then when swim lessons are available, and then the things that we're talking about talking about water safety out of the water and helping develop some of those behaviors so that, if he does, that he understands at 4 that he doesn't know how to swim, that he can't float without the life jacket, that going to water is, we want kids to respect the water. We want them to love the water, but we also have to have those conversations. And it's a big thing.
Yeah, I think these shortages will have a big impact. Hopefully, we're not going to see an increase in drowning statistics because we have a lack of places. I know a lot of places are not allowing. I know I toured somewhere, and normally they would allow outside people from the park to come in for day passes.
Right.
But because they can't get any lifeguards to work.
Well,
they're only allowing the people that are staying in the park to use the aquatic facilities, and there's no day passes. So that's how it's being handled somewhat.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of communities that pools are not reopening at all because they can't staff the lifeguard shortages, or because of the lifeguard shortages, they can't staff the pools safely. And so then what's happening too is then we're pushing people to open water, at least, to accessing water because it's hot. And thank you, climate change and global warming, for it's getting hotter. So yeah, all these things, I am nervous that these things are going to, that we are going to see an increase in drownings. I think that's what's so important about talking about and getting the messaging out there about things that people can do to be safer around water and things that they can do. Because I think that awareness piece is going to help with that spike. I believe that. I have to believe that. I can't do this work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and not believe that this is helping.
Right.
Yeah.
So how can a company like me or any of the people listening, like pool and aquatic professionals, pool owners, how can we all help specifically with drowning prevention?
Okay, so first of all, I'll challenge you, Lauren, and I'll challenge anyone who's listening to go take our water safety quiz on our website, colinshope.org/quiz. Take it. At the end, there's a little comment box so you can put in, let's talk about pools, or Lauren, you can decide what you want people to put in there, but take the quiz, then share it on your social media, because it's something you can say. We say that you became a water guardian after you take the quiz. You can print out or take a screenshot of your downloadable water guardian certificate and then challenge other people to take it. That's one thing that can help with the education and help with the talking about it. And then think about, if you're listening, what is your sphere of influence, so to speak? Like, who in your particular world can you reach with water safety education? If you're an apartment manager, you can influence those families that live in those apartments. How can you influence them with educational tools? Or how can you, if you're a pool service provider and you're cleaning pools, how can you impact those homeowners? They're trusting you to go in their backyard and clean their pool. And how can you help influence them and let them know? Hand out water safety cards. We have them available on our
Talking about pool companies really quick, what should they be looking for if they're servicing or cleaning the pool? Well, how could they help a homeowner?
Okay, so I have a big checklist that Kim Hodges, who she lost her son Brandon to a drowning years and years ago, and she has worked really hard on this backyard pool checklist. And we're actually working here in Texas with pool service companies to have this checklist. And there's everything on that checklist from, are the gates open? Are the latches working on the gates? Are there pool toys? I know when I was telling you I did a year embedded as a pool service cleaning person for a year. While I was doing Colin's Hope, I cleaned pools on the side, partly to help out a friend, but also to see what is happening in backyard pools. How can I better talk to families about what they can do? And I saw gates left open, gates propped open, toys left by the pool. At one home, there was always this big Shamu the whale inflatable that was always in the pool. Well, if there are children in that home, kids are curious. That whale in the pool is going to be something that's going to draw that child to the pool. And if a kid gets access and there's not adults out there, they could fall in. So I would always take Shamu out, and I'd take him out and I'd remove him from the pool area. There was another home where there was a baby carriage, like a carriage that a toddler would push, and it was always by the pool. And I would take that thing and I would move it away. So look for pool toys, get them moved out of there. We have, give water safety information to to homeowners looking for, I know when I was cleaning pools, I discovered a drain that was missing a screw. And so we had to replace that because that becomes an entrapment hazard. So all the things around that we're talking about layers of protection, our pool service techs have this like incredible trust in the homeowner because they're letting you in their backyard pool to be able to identify some of those things. So pointing them out to a homeowner is, I think, incredibly important.
Communicate any of the things that you just talked about to the homeowner. Give out some of the water safety info that they could get from you guys.
Put the quiz on the link to the quiz on billing statements. You know, we teach our kids like in terms of like bullying. It's like, if you see something, say something in schools. We talk to kids about that. Like I say that to, if you see something, say something. If you're a pool service tech or something and you see something that could be a hazard that could cause, if you say something, you could prevent a drowning, you could save a life, right? So that's something that I think is really, really important. And being good role models, this is something that I will say that anyone listening is that if there are more of us who are practicing water safer behaviors around water, whether that's with our own families, in our own world, if we're going out on a boat, if we're, whatever those are, we're practicing those behaviors, that is going to be a ripple effect into the people that are in our community. So think about who is your community, who's your sphere of influence, and then what can you do? I always like when I do presentations, I ask people to choose one thing they're going to do in their personal life to be safer around water, and one thing they're going to do in their professional life that's going to help educate the people that they interact with to be safer around water. Maybe that's, I'm going to take the water safety quiz, and then I'm going to share that with my coworkers, or I'm going to share that with on social media, but do something. Don't just listen to this podcast and then put what you heard into some sort of drawer or,
take action.
Box.
Take some type of action.
Take action. I mean, we've got tons of resources at Colin's Hope, but there's a lot of others, like we mentioned, local organizations, or reach out to us and ask. Tell me, I'm in
where can they find you again?
So colinshope.org is our website, info@colinshope.org. I get that. My program director gets that. My email is my first name last name @colinshope.org. I'll tell you my cell phone number because you can reach out, 512-294-3910. Go for it. Ask me anything. We want to help. We want to connect with resources. There's a lot out there. We just need more people on the ground, in the water, in the pools, in the wherever, who are carrying this message. And the more of us that we really can change the culture around water safety. I truly believe that. I have to believe that we're making a difference and we're saving lives. We don't get to hear about,
That's why I had you on the podcast, because I knew you were I had already been told about you, an organization from a podcast sponsor. And I was like super duper excited to get you on here so I could get you into this series during the summer. So thank you so much for being on today, Alyssa.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And we say, Colin used to say today was the best day ever. So have the best day ever. And together we can do more to prevent drowning.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for diving in today with the Let's Talk About Pools podcast. Be sure to follow us on our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. And feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts so more aquatic professionals like you can learn about the show. We appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Let's Talk About Pools podcast.